to still talk about it. Like, oh my God, it's a dream that it was as popular as it is. So it's really
Steven. Okay, fun. So we'll definitely get to that. But for people who don't know who you are, I'm going to, I mean, oh, which one is that?
yeah. Yeah. She always likes to come on camera whenever I'm doing something. Hi, Rita.
So Shiva Honey, you are a high priestess with the Satanic Temple. What does that mean for people who are like, I have no clue?
Oh, that's a great question. To be honest, but yeah, I became the temple's only a 10-year-old organization, basically, or just over 10 years old now, 11, I think. And they just started a ministry program. So about 2 years ago, I was one of the first people to go through it. So I'm a minister in the temple, and you can pick whatever sort of, preferred title that you want. So that's what I went with. But
yeah.
in my sort of role, I guess, in the bigger organization, I'm, one of the people who is kind of like writing the primary text, I would say, for the temple. It's not officially from the temple, but it's from me. I've been involved for about, I think this is 10 years. And I started writing about ritual and how it intersects with our version of Satanism and non-theistic beliefs, probably about 5 years ago now. So that's just kind of in terms of like my title, but also like what I do, what my interest is in, the sort of work that I'm creating for the community. That's kind of how it all fits together. So, yeah.
And it's interesting. So just recently they've offered the ministry program, but if we can go back to the beginning, you are really instrumental in helping. I mean, you helped set up the Detroit chapter and some of the other chapters as well.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, actually, first, now they're called congregations, but back then it was a chapter. So Detroit was the first chapter to be established. So Jex was the director at that point, and there was this community of artists that just had known each other for a long time, and we were doing all these occult events before the temple got started. So we kind of all reconnected and decided we wanted to build this chapter together. So we unveiled the Baphomet, which was like a big thing that happened. We put the Snaketivity display in the Capitol in Lansing, which was super interesting and fun. Yeah, we were the most visible group for a long time, and we really kind of set the tone for the rest of the organization. So I was a part of kind of putting all those events together and getting everything off the ground. And then I was also a part of later, about a year later, what ended up being called the National Council, which was a group of people, about 10 people, I think between 6 and 10, who kind of helped get other chapters up and going, helped create internal procedures, that sort of thing. And yeah, since then, it's like things are, I don't even know what the organizational hierarchy is, or like the bureaucracy is within it exactly, but it's really expanded tremendously. So I was really involved at the beginning stages of everything. And yeah, now I'm still involved, but, kind of working more independently to provide resources for the community.
So thank you. You mentioned some of the early work with the Satanic Temple, and I want to talk about that because and kind of what the Satanic Temple is, and then I also want to talk about your own work, which feels like more and more it's centered on. From getting like, I know you've written a book on grief, you've written a book on ritual, and so sort of maybe we could start from the sort of activist background and then move towards the ritual and grief for the arc of this conversation, if that sounds good.
Yeah, it sounds good. Yeah,
so I know, because you had, for people who aren't familiar with like what the satanic, outwardly facing, what the Satanic Temple is, do you mind just maybe sharing a little bit about that? And maybe some of the best, maybe your favorite actions that you worked on.
Yeah. So we are now a federally recognized religious organization. But we started out, sorry, I've got my cats are like in and out. Hi, Mew. He's working on my house right now, so he's been hiding. Hi. You okay? Just checking in. Well, we love animals, I can tell you that much. So. All right. Anyways, so so we're a religious organization. We have a set of 7 tenets. We are non-theistic, which means we don't believe in like a literal Satan, or we don't, most of us don't prescribe to the supernatural, broadly speaking. And we were started back in 2013. Well, one of the reasons that I started becoming involved with the temple is that I became aware of them probably in 2013 when there was like a bunch of public actions that were happening at the time, and I thought the street theater, and it was activist related, so it was like separation of church and state related, it was reproductive rights related, and I'd been involved in the activist world for a while, but kind of took a break, as one does when they get burned out. And I saw these actions and I thought they were fantastic. And I really was into like Abby Hoffman and the Diggers and all these folks who were doing like theatrical protest movements and things back in the 60s and 70s. So I thought it was such a cool marriage of, the theater, art, and then like legitimate, like in the sort of courtroom, legislative action. So that's what really got me into the temple. And I think that's one of the big things that gets a lot of folks sort of, engaged with the work that we're doing is the sort of activist work. But then a lot of us too, we come from, we've had like, I can't speak for everybody, but I would say a large amount of people have also had, religious trauma, and that's kind of like another avenue in terms of how people have gotten together. And I think, especially the work that I'm doing, and I think people are getting more and more into, we're more and more trying to create a safe space for people to be able to process and kind of liberate themselves from maybe some of the trauma that they've had with religion over the years. And then, it's also just a great community of people. So we all, have a similar core beliefs. We have the tenets that kind of glue us together. There's a shared aesthetic. There's this shared sort of belief in and inspiration through this this idea of this literary Satan, the liberator, this person who fights against injustice and that sort of thing. So we tend to connect on all those different levels as a group. And then we're just kind of expanding as we go. Like I said, we're only a 10-year organization. The Catholic Church has thousands of years on us at this point. We're still kind of figuring everything out, but we were recognized as a religion federally probably 3 years ago or so. Probably around the same time the ministry program came out. And it's been super interesting. So, sorry, my cats are trying to do this. I'm soon enough once you can leave. But anyways, so like some of the early things that I was involved with, some of my favorite memories. So the unveiling of the Baphomet statue. We created the Baphomet statue, which is this I think it's 2 to 4 ton bronze, massive statue to kind of counteract a number of Ten Commandment monuments that were being put in state capitals. So, there was a line that was being crossed around church and state, and of course, and favor of Christians essentially. So we're like, well, if you do this for one religion, you've got to do it for all. So hence the Baphomet creation. So we've never actually put it on state property permanently, but we did unveil it back in Detroit in 2015. So that was a huge undertaking. That was fun and scary, and we were getting death threats, and we had to switch venues multiple times, and we at one point in my yard hiding because transporting that thing and getting into the venues is so difficult. It's insane. Then we're getting death threats, and churches were protesting against us. The fact that we were able to pull that off was really meant a lot to me. And similarly, back in 2018, I helped bring the statue to Arkansas because they were considering putting in a Ten Commandments monument. So we held a rally in Little Rock, which was also terrifying. The KKK showed up, and the Grand Dragon was there. There was all these white supremacists that showed with guns, and were again sending us threats. So we had there was full police force in trying to kind of keep things from going really south really quickly. But that was another great adventure, and I think proved a point. Those are probably the 2 things that stick out most that I thought was really cool. But we've got a number of cases in the courts right now trying to fight for reproductive rights. There's just a lot of our legislative work to this point is focused around bodily autonomy and reproductive rights because that's something we really value, and then the separation of church and state, and a lot of times connected together.
Um, to go back into that for a moment, you said, who made this thing and how much did it weigh?
Okay, so I believe Lucian, who's like our co-founder and spokesperson, he designed it,
Okay.
and then artist named Mark Porter.
Okay.
But yeah, it's tons. It's like I'm like looking in my room right now. How tall is it? I mean, it has to be like 12 or 15 feet tall at least, and then it's like literally tons to move. I think that it's in Salem right now in the gallery headquarters, and I believe that they had to like reinforce the floor just to be able to like, you know, make sure it wouldn't fall through this like Victorian funeral home mansion thing. So it's so heavy. And we had like one of the venues in Detroit that offered to host us was the St. Andrews. Like they were excited about it. Like Live Nation was about it, everything. But we couldn't figure out how to get the statue into the venue because it's just like you have to have massive doors and like.
Wow. And for
The party was in a warehouse space that we found last minute, and we're able to private warehouse space. So that's how we were able to get it in back in 2015.
And you were able to bring it into government property as well?
Yeah,
were you able?
not inside, but we were able to put it outside. So basically, there's a movie called Hail Satan. I'm in that one actually, yes. But the culmination of the movie is us being at the Capitol in Little Rock, and so we're outside, like right in front of the Capitol building. But yeah, we didn't put it inside. Although I can say, recently, last year, I've contributed to a few tracks on the band Satanic Planet, which is Lucian, our co-founders, band Pearson from The Locust, and a bunch of other cool bands. Their group, and I sung in a couple tracks. And speaking of being in a state capitol, the other favorite thing was performing inside of the Indiana State Capitol, like last. I think it was.
I saw imagery from that. It was like incredible.
Thank you. Yeah, I feel like it was too. I still am processing it. Like I was just talking to the guys last week or a couple days ago about it. And I'm like still processing it, and I still feel like I haven't really, you know, gone through it all in my mind. But that was another scary but fun and interesting and felt like very powerful thing, because Indiana is one of those places where there's been like so much repression, and it's just like the laws that have passed and things that are being proposed are so draconian. It felt very powerful to be in that space and be able to perform and just show up, you know.
And where can people see that footage?
Yeah, so I think it's on the various timelines. I think it's on mine. It's on the Satanic Planet Band's timeline. But then there's also, I can't remember the name of the production company, but probably the easiest way to find it is just to go to Satanic Planet's like Instagram. You'll be able to see or get the link to where it's on YouTube or whatever. So
it's funny, I had a whole list of questions, and I love talking to you because it just goes, well, I go everywhere and you just bring such detail to everything. I think that's your life. Like you're I mean, you have the work with the Satanic Temple, you're a musician, you're an author, you have your own client practice. Like you do so much. So which I'm gonna try to carry into some of your personal stuff, and maybe this is the pivot point. You know, this sounds on one hand, this is a very broad question, so I'll ask the broad version of it, and then I want to get specific to you. But why Satan, right? Like, why Satan for the Satanic Temple? Like, what is imbued in that? And then also for you, why Satan?
Yeah, I think I guess, you know, the thing that originally attracted me to the organization was a lot of the activism that they'd been doing. I'll speak to my own personal opinion on why I chose this. And I think I just, you know, this is, again, I love talking to you too, because we get into such interesting conversations. But so last year around this time, my mom died, and I just wrote a little bit about this on my Patreon, and also just on some of my personal like Facebook page or whatever. But I had a very traumatic childhood, so Christianity was definitely like a sort of tool of my own, like oppression and abuse. Yeah, this whole idea of like Satanism, but not like the old type, like this new type of that's like very, you know, it's feminist, it's queer, it's you know, involved in activism. It was so appealing to me, and it was, I think, also a conduit for me to be able to process trauma and sort of, work through some of the issues I was going through at the time and continue to. One of the things that popped up in my memory, and we might have talked about this before, last time we spoke, but when I was thinking about my mom and her death, because she passed away unexpectedly, and we had a pretty rough relationship for the last 10 years. But one of the things that I remembered, I was like 7 at the time, and my mom got a letter from my stepdad, who was like super abusive, sister. And it was a letter basically telling her that, like, I can't remember who it was addressed to, her or him, but like she'd been molested by him. And I was like around the same age that she was when this happened.
Yeah.
Took the letter into the church because we were going to church a lot, and it was his church, and his family were deacons and stuff. And she feel like God's voice is telling me to get a divorce and leave him. And I found this letter, and he's like, no, that's the voice of Satan telling you to like divorce him. So literally it was like very real, not just this belief that I was damned as a child, but like the abuse that happened was definitely like endorsed by the church in one way or the other. So for me, it's very personal, and it's taking on this mantle and being blasphemous, and something I want to do more in the future. And I've spoke about this publicly in some of the interviews I've done, but talk about just like the abuse of the church and, the statistics on everything. And I feel such a passion to try to speak to other people who've gone through similar things, or create avenues for healing for folks who have this sort of religious trauma, and for them to know that they're not alone. And, which is, I think, where some of the work around grief also comes through. But yeah, so that was all very appealing to me, And then, of course, I also was really into everybody who I met that was part of the organization, was so interesting and cool. We had so many commonalities back in the day. Everything just kind of fit for me.
So for me, the question always comes up, right? When someone is making the church to be the, I don't know, alternative to the church, right? There's always the sort of the power question that comes into play here. And you and I had this conversation in person, and I think what I really love, maybe this is the pivot towards ritual, what I really love about your work is, it feels, if I'm getting this right, especially with the work around ritual, you're really trying to empower other people to think for themselves, right? As opposed to like creating this other sort of monolith where like, okay, so this is actually the answer. There's no sort of alternative answer. And can we talk a little bit about maybe how what your relationship is to ritual, how that acted as part of your own healing, and how you can see that helping others?
Yeah, so around probably about a year or two before I ended up, quite a few years actually, before I ended up in the temple, I was able to separate from a lot of the toxic family members that I helped my mom get a divorce, take care of her, which caused a lot of other problems later on. But I was really getting into a place where I was separating from my old belief systems, and I was able to feel safe enough to finally start processing the trauma that I had, and realize like the reality of the situation that I lived and everything. And I just really didn't know what I wanted in life, and I was going through a lot of emotional pain and confusion. And so ritual was this sort of grounding force to help me take time for myself, understand what my needs were, put energy toward goal setting, and it just made me feel really good. I love the mystical aspect of it. It just felt like when I was performing ritual, I was like, even, again, because I do things non-theistically, not deity, it feels like you're being transported for me into like almost another dimension. It's like the mundane of the everyday kind of goes away, and like these patterns that we've been sort of maybe unwittingly attached to disappear, and you're able to really get this clarity and this power and this beauty from these sort of like ephemeral moments. And so that really attracted me to ritual and became a conduit for my own healing. So I was sort of privately practicing ritual for a while, and when I joined the temple, there was a lot of confusion as to like, how can we perform ritual if it's connected to this, everybody assumes ritual is connected to the supernatural, and the reality have to be real. And so I was practicing tarot, and I was actually, still am, like a professional tarot reader. And hopefully, sorry, I know I'm getting a little off here. Let me know if I need to return back.
No, this is great.
But I felt like, you know, it had helped me so much. I really wanted to find a way to be able to teach other people about it or open up the door for other people. My poor cat's so angry at me. Um, open the door for other people to explore and to, you know, have similar experiences to what I've had. So I started back in like 2017. Okay, so there's a lot of controversy about what ritual was, and you know, because of our take on science and our sort of grounding in that, I started doing a lot of, you know, because I had the anecdotal experience, but I started doing research on what would have been published about ritual and what the science says about it. And the reality is that regardless of if, you know, you have any sort of supernatural belief or you're doing things non-theistically, ritual has been scientifically proven to reduce stress, like help you deal with fear, help you with grief, improve performance. And the science is only beginning to develop for these things. So, you know, regardless of how you slice it, like it can be something that it can be very positive for people. And you know, we're a religion also, so like ritual is part of religion. Yeah. It's part of spiritual practice. So so I was sort of quietly practicing and also just fielding a lot of quiet bullying from people
in Satanic Temple, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, you were getting grief, right? Because it was like too much. This is too close to spiritualism or too close to like maybe, yeah.
You know, it was just a lot of people on the internet who just like to talk. You know what I mean? A bunch of gappers, really, who just like angry at things, which I still have. You know, I'm not a fan of. But yeah, so I got asked back in 2017 to come to the temple headquarters and sort of like last minute create a black mass, which was actually well, it's very briefly shown in that movie Hail Satan. But okay. So I just like, that was my first time performing a ritual sort of on behalf of TST publicly, a group ritual. And then they kept asking me to come back. So I had not only my own personal practice, but I had this experience of coordinating group ritual for people that year by year got more and more profound and became more and more interesting. And I saw people have these really cathartic sort of experiences with. So based on, you know, my anecdotal experience, these group rituals I was doing, and then also just this research, these, you know, articles I was looking into, the meta-analysis of what the research is showing, I was like, oh, I really should, in fact, create a book about ritual, like, because there hadn't been anything like that within the organization or within the religion. So I just had to do it, and yeah, did it. And then that was really the beginning of me starting to publish and do a lot of work around that topic and speak more on it and work more in it publicly. But yeah, it was a fantastic experience, and I was really, you know, I knew somebody had to write something about it, and I really felt like I was the person who had the most experience with it. And I never imagined ever writing a book, to be honest, but I was like, well, why not? And that's pretty much how I approach everything. But I was really happy with how it was received, and it's like, you know.
I want to jump in there real quick. So for people who are just joining, you are Shiva Honey of the Satanic Temple, but I want to say just sort of your own practice as well. And the book we're referring to is The Devil's Tome, a book of modern satanic ritual. And that was the first book you wrote because you've written others since.
Yes, yeah, that's the first book that I wrote. That came out right as the pandemic 2020. So it was a crazy time.
And just sort of sit with that book for a moment. I have a copy. It's in Detroit, unfortunately, but what I really love is you give people a starting point for ritual. You're like, this is what's worked for me. Here's things you can try, but you really encourage people to create their own ritual.
Yeah.
Right. To really make it personal. What do you think the power? What power is there in that?
Yeah, I have this saying. I also did a deck, and like when you open the deck box, there's like this gilded message in it that says "You are the magic." So that's really kind of like my overall philosophy. You know, period. That's kind of, it's a message of empowerment and the idea that you can be the agent of your own healing, of your own destiny, of your own life. And even in my work around death and grief, I feel like that's the thing that comes through. But yeah, ritual, I find that, you know, sorry, my cat's out, so hey, Mew, come here. I just don't want him to there's upstairs, so I don't want him to get lost. Oh yeah, stay. Okay. But sorry, so so the idea of somebody being able, especially if you grew up in a situation where everything was so dogmatic and ritual was had to be practiced a certain way and like everything was so rote and boring. I think the idea of you being able to approach ritual from your own understanding, your own aesthetic, your own culture, I think that can be like a hugely moving experience. And as I was doing research for my second book, The Devil's Death, which is my book about grief and death, I found more research that was kind of emerging about specifically that says that rituals that you create yourself are the most impactful and have the most, have the most ability to kind of change things and rewire your brain and all this stuff. I think that it's something that if it's, if it calls to you, if it resonates with you, that can be a really sort of beautiful tool in sort of your work of life, I guess.
I want to know, when we were talking, you had a story about the first magic book that you picked up and like your first exploration, like the moment that you realized like magic was real, which I know we're getting to like, we're like, okay, it's science, but also there's the unexplainable. Would you mind sharing that story?
Yeah, this is really funny. So my friend Jessica, who I consider like sort of one of my mystical sisters, I met, we'll probably talk about travel later, but I met her decades ago in Italy. So we kept in touch. She's one of my best friends, although we never see, we see each other very rarely because she's in LA and I'm in Detroit. We stay in touch and send each other gifts and stuff like that. So it was maybe like a year or two before I joined the temple. She went to a used bookstore, and now I can't remember the name of the book. I found this book that was like all gold, and I'm probably, Jessica, if you're listening, you can find her on Instagram, Revolution. I get her. She does great readings and she's very insightful and very cool and does amazing work. But she found, so we were all kind of like entering this journey, I think, at the same time, even though we didn't know. But she found this book, and it was like a compendium of like kind of cheesy magic stuff and ritual things. But she bought it, and then apparently she had some weird dreams about it. I think if I'm getting this right, she had some scary dreams about it. And then she was like, but then she also had this feeling that she had to send it to me. And that was really like a nice sort of entryway to just like exploring things more. I mean, I grew up in such a conservative house that it was like, even as an adult, when I bought a home and I moved my mom in to help her get her divorce and everything, she was so like any sort of occult books in the house. And it's like, well, if you don't like it, you can leave. But like, so even just getting that first book was like a pretty big deal. And however goofy it was, it's still like some insight into how things work. And it gave some sort of like basic idea of how rituals constructed and these like elements that can be put into it to focus people and everything like that.
I know, sorry, I'm like the comments, it's IG lives are always fantastic because there's all these like getting distracted by the comments, but yeah, I love this fact that we kind of glossed over this, but I like the fact that your friend had like a nightmare about this book and then it's like, but I should send it to you.
Let me send it to her. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe then she had a dream that, I don't know, it's something, it made a lot of sense when it happened, but it doesn't, in retrospect, it doesn't sound very good.
Do you remember like the first, I know it was a cheesy magic book, but like, do you remember the first like spell you used out of that book? And was there a moment of like, shit, this worked, or like, there's something here?
Yeah, there was I think it wasn't even in the book, but I have these like, it was a really weird time in my life when things were wild and I was also processing a lot of trauma. So sometimes I have like blank spaces as to where things connect, but it's like, it might have been, it was related to the book. I don't think it was in the book, but it was this ritual that I found because I looked back in the book and couldn't find it online. I thought it was in the book, but God, I can't even think of what it's called. It's like something about like a new avatar power ritual or something like that. And that could be the wrong name, but something along those lines.
Yeah.
But it was basically just a sort of like, it was an incantation that supposedly had you like call on like archangels or something like that. I'm still not entirely sure. It was like, so again, like this compendium book, I think it pulled on other sorts of areas of probably like Western esotericism.
Yeah.
But you didn't get the full background as to what everything was and like the lexicon for things and whatever. But, you know, it basically had you do this incantation, and it had you relax and sort of meditate and like allow everything to kind of like, you know, your energy rolls through your body, but then really essentially visualize and write down what your intentions were and what your goals were. And so I read this ritual, and then I think I performed it without reading what other people's experiences are. But everybody was saying, I was like on Reddit, and people were like, yeah, I did this ritual, and like my life totally, like, it was a tower moment, you know, like my life fell apart, or it got really great, or both.
Yeah.
So I feel like that ritual, and what that really was for me was just being able to focus on, kind of like learn some basic essentials of like focus, but also set intentions. Everything in my life started to change, and a lot of things did fall apart, but I think for a good reason, you know. And so that simultaneously, meow. Sorry, my cat's trying to break up. Meow, come here. Come here, please. So simultaneously that and like the tarot was really kind of like what got me started on everything, I would say. And because I did notice like my life started to change, and I started to have these insights, and things started to shift for me so quickly. And travel also was happening simultaneously, so it was.
I know for you, right? Like you are really big on the ritual of setting goals, setting intentions for yourself. I know you do a lot of like, you're very, yeah. And, you know, I know we've talked a little bit about your upbringing, and it feels maybe perhaps, I'm wondering if having sort of grown up sort of oftentimes like, in difficult circumstances, maybe I can relate myself, and you don't necessarily, like, no one ever like stops to say like, hey, do you want to stop and think about what you want to do with your life? There, you know, I think we can all, you know, many of us just kind of tend to get on a track, like, this is what's around me, I'll do that. Do you think something about that ritual maybe clicked in your brain and allowed you for the first time to really like think like, wait, I can have some choice here and like what I want to do?
Yeah, 100%. I think you explained it beautifully. And I think that's kind of what I was thinking of earlier when you brought up these questions. But this idea that I feel like we go on autopilot so much. So that's like one element of, I think, the human experience that can kind of get in the way of what you want. But then that was a huge part of it. And then I was also such a people pleaser. I was really parentified as a kid, and I was all, you know, whether I was trying to please God or I was trying to please my parents or whatever was happening, because of like the abusive situation I grew up in, I was very much like repressed and unable to really even say what my own needs were. You know what I mean? My needs were never important. So to deny them was just the natural thing to do. So it was ritual that gave me this liberating experience of being able to create this space for myself that I'd never had before, where I could really ask myself the most important questions I think of life, which is just, what do I want? You know, devoid of everybody else's expectations and fears that I might have or whatever. It gave me that space to feel like for the first time I could really ask myself these, you know, essential questions, and then feel confident enough to actually move forward on pursuing them, regardless of what people didn't like about it, you know?
Yeah. And you know how I, I know you're a very humble person, but it feels like trying to think of how to phrase this, your own work with ritual. Essentially, you brought that, we mentioned earlier, you brought that sort of ritual into the Satanic Temple. And how do you think that that should have changed the way that the temple works for people, and like maybe how the temple sort of promotes the, I want to say, empowerment of the individual through ritual? Or maybe that's just something I'm overassuming.
I think it changed a lot. Like,
Yeah.
once, you know, not to toot my own horn, but also like if I'm being real, you know what I mean? I think that, like I was talking about before, people were really confused about how ritual could be a part of the organization, and you know, with our specific belief system and stuff like that. And I think the book gave people examples of how, you know, give like scientific reason, examples of how this could be done, and, you know, hopefully inspiration for them to kind of pursue this on their own. And within, you know, it was like, it ended up being like a bestseller, and it was like, you know, the temple even carries it now, as well as a couple other things from me. But it really, I think, set the tone and helped people understand sort of my perspective on, which I think has subsequently become like the temple's perspective more or less for how ritual is done. And since this book was published, you know, the ministry started, so of course ritual is an important part of that. I've just seen this crazy proliferation of all sorts of, you know, people pursuing the path, and you know, people getting really into ritual, and people finding how impactful it can be. So I do think I think if the book wasn't published, I think I think hopefully the conclusion would have come logically eventually, but I think it would have taken more time for sure. And I think that I hopefully provided people, you know, I didn't want to create a book that was like, I've read Western esotericism, which is like, oh my God, like I cannot get past like 5 pages. And you know, you're ashamed because you don't want to read like this fucking boring book written by some like old white guy or whatever. Really just like, I don't know, my opinion, just like, it's, you know, it's not relatable. It's like very difficult to understand. It's like written in Middle English or something like that. I wanted to create something that was accessible, that was in like plain language. And I have I'm, you know, professional witch now basically, but I have like a master's degree, and I've worked in my previous life with like doctors and lawyers and CEOs. And the thing that I realized while doing all that is like, if you actually want to reach people, or, you know, you're only as smart as how you get the message out, right? So I'm like, create something that was accessible and not pretentious, and just like full of love, and had like a feminine energy to it, you know? So that's kind of how I was hoping, because, you know, I think that's the other thing that like motivated me, as I read The Satanic Witch, which I think it was, I can't remember if it was Anton LaVey or one of his people that put it out, but it seemed like so stupid. So I was like, I have to do a counterpoint to this, you know what I mean? So that's kind of how it all emerged. And I think that now there's this beautiful tone of ritual within the organization. And I think it's cool. I feel really proud and excited that I think the book took off and people resonate, and that it's been able to impact the org. And that's sort of like my idea with all this stuff that I'm publishing, is that I literally spend my entire life thinking about these things, you know, whether it's grief or death, through the lens of like Satanism, through the temple and stuff. So it's like, I've been able to do this for full time, and you know, this is what I want my contribution to be. I want to help, and I've never like called myself a philosopher or whatever else, but I feel like when I think about it, and like I'm actually honest about the work that I'm doing, like so much of it is along those lines, you know?
Yeah, for sure. Do you find yourself like having to remind people that you're not the answer? Right? I imagine because you've become such a personality that people want to come to you and like, give me a ritual, tell me what to do. And how do you approach that?
Actually, I don't get a lot of that. I don't know. It's interesting. I haven't had many people approach me from that perspective.
Okay.
And because I give a good enough explanation of, you know, that I'm sort of like an anti-guru type person. So it's been good. If I get people who want to work with me, I think they just need a little guidance, you know. That's kind of how whether I'm doing one-on-one work, or like the you know, like the retreats or whatever, or teaching classes, or, you know, I'm trying to be there more as a guide, as somebody who can kind of like hold your hand and support you as you kind of like figure out your own way. That's how I've always seen myself, you know, with a little lantern leading to the darkness or something.
You're the hermit card.
Yeah, totally. That's literally me. Definitely. Yeah.
I know we're coming up on time, so I have two last questions for you. I want to, before it slips away, is it slipping away? I want to talk about the biggest thing. You know, we're in this moment of both where individual and collective grief is just like off the charts. For people who are like struggling with finding, you know, grounding, I'm not, you know, asking you to give solutions, but like, I don't know, do you have advice for people, or ways that, like, resources? I know you wrote a whole book about grief, and I just sort of want to know your sort of,
yeah. So I put this book out a couple of years ago. I'm like, what year is it? 2021 or 2022, I think. Called The Devil's Death, Your Satanic Companion for Grief and Dying. So that's where I put most of my thoughts to this point on grief. I try to create because so I became a death doula a few years ago, and didn't find many great resources on grief, especially from like a non-theistic perspective, because what you'll get people and what people will tell you is that, they're, people, if you're talking about death, it's like some place or this, that, or the other. Or if you're talking about, I don't want to say smaller grief, but grief that's not related to death, the sort of grief that maybe we have every day, like whether it's heartbreaks or disappointments or whatever's happening, we're not really given resources to process that or to acknowledge it or to work with it. So I wanted to create something that was, again, like accessible to people, that could cover the topics of like not only how to, advocate for yourself in the healthcare system, but also like, what you can do, how, you can plan a funeral or what you can do with your body, but also how to deal with grief and also rituals and all of this stuff. So it was really, I think about that book and I'm like, I don't know how I did it, but it covers kind of everything. Yeah. But there is a on grief. And so I was also simultaneously writing this book, and I found out my dad unexpectedly died. And then, now this last year, my mom passed away. So I was like actively going through it and wrote about it quite honestly and shared both like what I'd learned, but then also I was relying again on the research about grief, and also friends of mine who are therapists chimed in for the book and stuff like that. That's probably the greatest resource that I've got. And I'm trying to talk about it more on my Instagram. There's a bunch of really amazing creators too on Instagram or through the internet. You can find through the internet that are talking about grief. I think there's a lot of good resources out there. You just have to find somebody that resonates with you. But the biggest, probably the biggest piece of advice I can give is for people who are dealing with it is to just, seek out resources and give yourself time to process grief, because I think that's like the ultimate act of self-care. I was thinking about recently, as I'm a person of my mom's death, I'm like being able to give yourself time to rest and to process things and let time kind of like take away a bit of the sting, is such a great gift. And it's not something that like capitalism or our general culture really supports. I think it's needed. It's like grief is something that is so deep and so complicated typically, and everybody experiences it differently, that to be able to really do that inner, give yourself time to kind of explore it within yourself is the greatest gift I feel like we can give, because it teaches us lessons. It allows us to, close our wounds. And it can also be, I call it like the great revolution. I've coined the phrase like anguish is alchemy. Like I feel like if we're in a place where we can approach grief with an open mind, it can be this transformative tool that we have at our disposal. So that's, if you've got the energy, you can really transform your life through exploring grief and understanding it and understanding yourself.
So yeah, no, that's beautiful. I know, and you cover all of this in depth in the book, and I'm very excited to The Devil's Death, Your Satanic Companion for Death and Dying. Did I get that correct?
For grief and dying, yeah.
For grief and dying. I'm sorry, I literally for death and dying, for grief and dying. And that book is available. Everything's through your website.
Yeah.
I mean, you can get it you can do a Google search, but yeah, the best place to buy is probably through your website, right?
.com. And I was also going to say, I've got a pre-order up for a deck actually that I'm creating called Anguish is Alchemy. So that's taking a lot of the lessons from the grief chapter in the book, and putting them into like deck form. So now I'm making a deck essentially to help you work through grief and do that introspective work and that sort of thing. So that's up on the website too. Can I show you two other things real quick before we go?
Yeah, for sure. This is exciting.
I haven't actually showed anybody this because I was waiting for the moment to like unveil it, but I'll do it now and then I'll make some bigger videos later. But check this out. So this is my next book. This is obviously upside whatever because of the camera. But anyways, look how thick this boy is.
What is this? This is your book. How long have you been working on this for?
It's bigger than my head. It's over 500 pages. So this is called Memento Mori. It's a limited edition book. There's only 222 that are going to be made. But this is one of the things I've been spending the last year doing. I've been putting together this book, and what it essentially is it's a book for you to record your life story and like preserve your legacy. So from like the Satanic, if you don't believe in the afterlife, or you want to put your energy towards something to pass on to people, or to just do the self-reflection, this is the book that I created. So let me read the index real quick, because I feel like that's about it.
And for those who just joined, I'm speaking with Shiva Honey. So yeah, read the index, please.
Yeah, so it's like, it's got multiple sections. So this is, I like to think of this book as a tool for you to build your best life, but also like be able to document your life story. So it's got one section is like basically my story through the decades. So for each decade of life, it's got a bunch of prompts for you to write about your life and like what your favorite things are, what your lessons were, what you can tell yourself. So all the way from childhood through like your hundreds. It's got like subsections for that. It's got, the next section is called visions. So that's where you do, I've got my ritual to sight in there, and some other rituals for you to kind of focus on what you want your goals to be and where you want to go in life. So again, we're like looking at the past, we're looking at the present to be able to do introspective work. And then I've got a bunch of other sections where it's just kind of like free form writing, which are like love stories, grand adventures, rituals, and wisdom. So then you've got these big sections where you can write down like your own stories. But this is like some examples, I find a good thing, but like of, you know, just like basic stuff about like what you like at the time. Then again, like spaces for you to record your rituals, spaces for you to record your memories, like your goals, everything. But yeah, so this is, I thought like a 200-page book, but it ended up being 500 pages. It's like 6 pounds. It's gonna be so.
When is it out? And did you just get? Is that like your what's the word? Like the galley? What do they call like when you're editing a book?
Yeah, a
prototype. Prototype is okay. And when is it out?
So it's gonna be, I've got pre-orders up now, but it's gonna be shipping in spring. And then it's also got the book that I had come over, it's called My Death Wishes. So this is the other book that I finished this past year. And this is not limited edition, but it is a book for you to record what your death wishes are. So like basically, this is a book that you can, again, share with people who are supporting you throughout your life, that you can leave for people who are taking care of your kind of like will and assets after you die. But it's a very practical sort of, I would say like a companion to the Devil's Death, where you can actually like physically write out all of the, everything that you want to have happen. It helps you with estate planning. It helps you with figuring, explaining to people what you want to have done with your body, what your plans are, like what your obituary is, like what your assets are, all that stuff, in like a very, I think it's like 150 page or something like that book. Just this super practical tool is also going to be available soon. So I did a campaign with both of these books to release simultaneous, and that was something I really wanted to do after my mom passed, because with both of my parents, none of them did any sort of planning. And before they died, even though that I'm like a death tool and I wrote these books, obviously they didn't read them or whatever. So I was like, I really, again, want to create some accessible tools for people so that they can just, get this workbook, work through it, and, have something that they can share with their friends, their family, people who are going to be, supporting them through their life and death. So yeah, that's the prototype that I have here, but that'll also be out in the spring. I would say it's probably,
Oh my God. Having gone through the death of my father was pretty brutal, and I have none of the Capricorn energy that you have, let's say it that way. And I wish I would have had that book. I wish I would have had some sort of guide, because there's the grief you discuss. But then there's just like the actual like adulting, and it feels like that book really helps with that too, which is such a component and so much harder to do when you're grieving.
No, it's terrible. Advocate for everybody where you are in your life to start thinking about this now and documenting it, so you can be, no issues whatsoever, completely healthy, whatever's going on in your life. I would say complete this. If you are ill or have something going on where you're worrying about your mortality, do this. But it not only helps you, but it helps the people who are, your loved ones, because it is so traumatic to go through that. Like, and for me at least, you're already grieving, then you're having to go through the extra grief of trying to do the right thing and deal with all the mess that happens if you don't plan things before you die. And this can be such a gift, not only to you, but to your loved ones as well, because, you know, it just clarifies things. It's going to make things so easy, much easier for people. It's what I wish I had. Essentially, everything that I make is what I wish I had at the time, or what's helped me. So, you know, I didn't like going through any of the things that I've gone, all the death and grief that I've had the last few years. And I wish I didn't have, you know, the PTSD and the stuff that happened to me as a kid. But the way that I try to look at everything that's happened to me at this point is that through that whole lens of English's alchemy. I went through it, it happened. For me, part of my grieving process, I suppose, and my healing process is through focusing my energy on creating this work so that other people don't have to deal with or suffer the same way that I did, or have some support where I didn't have it so much. So.
Well, I'm sincerely thankful for your work. I'm so excited that we get to be friends. This has been like so amazing. I have to get going, but I want to mention New Orleans, and I don't want to mention New Orleans because I'm so stoked there's seats left. I want to like get on my computer and like I want to go with you. So to my own risk of this selling out before I can secure a seat, can you briefly tell me about New Orleans?
Yeah, so I decided travel for me has been another transformational aspect of my life. Like, to me, travel is like a portal to understanding yourself and healing and moving your life forward. And for years I wanted to go travel with my friends and create, like, it's been on my vision board, I guess, forever. But last year was really difficult, and a lot of things kind of came tumbling down. At a point where I'm like, you know what, why not try this thing that seems totally implausible and put it out there and see if people are into it. So I initially like planned this long weekend in New Orleans, this retreat that I announced about a month ago, and it like sold out immediately. It's only 10 spots because like I want to keep things small, and I'm doing cool tattooing and all this stuff. But then I just opened up a second set of dates for February next year. So I think there's 3 spots left, and someone just applied this morning. So yeah, like excited about it. This is something that I want to continue doing and like do more of it over time. Basically, it's a spot for people who are kind of like-minded. It's a retreat for people who are like-minded to get together and just kind of like build our magic and have fun and luxury. So I was thinking for a while about where to do this, and New Orleans has been a city that I've always felt very drawn to, and I've time in, and has such an interesting sort of like interesting history, an interesting link to the occult and to you know, kind of like non-Christian magical practices and that sort of thing. So I thought it would be a wonderful place for people to get together, for us to collectively learn, for us to do ritual. And one of the big idea of this whole retreat too is not only is it educational and all of that stuff, but it's also, you know, what I'm encouraging, that sort of vibe I'm trying to build for people, is an opportunity for them to just be joyous and have fun and just kind of explore the city their own sort of desire. So I'm making everything like super luxurious. We're gonna be singing spot, like good food, like music, fun, you know. And for me, having gone through so much grief in the last few years, it's like I love doing the grief work. I'm going to continue doing that, but I really want to provide opportunities for joy for people. And I feel like that's also something that's very satanic and like witchy and feminist, because there aren't, like, to feel desire and joy and like encourage that within people is something that I really want to do, because that's what makes me happy. And like, you know.
So, and I'm personally going to ask you when we get off this, if you will send me a link so I can, okay, because I slept on it, but now I'm focused and I can travel again. So that's a personal call to you. And for everyone else, where can people find you? How can people follow you? Best places.
So for the retreat, I have a website called The Witch, and I'm also going to start writing more about that. My website is serpentina.com, or if you go to thesatanicwitch.com, but you can find it in my bio. It's right there, and that's where you can see all the things that I've created. I also make like handmade ritual products. I have a lot of free rituals and free resources on that website. There's also a separate website that I started called My Death Wishes that has a lot of resources, like all that jazz too. So yeah, link in bio.
I get excited because I think I told you I just moved, and
oh my god,
also this is I'm so excited I've been meaning to take some photos of this and bring this out, but yes, this is another one of your offerings. I just want to hold it up for the camera.
I'm so
This has been so wonderful, Shiva Honey, and I should give myself an outro for people who don't know. I'm Vivi Henrietta of Art of the Zodiac, and I do these talks on the regular. We have a longer interview that's going to be coming out, so I just implore everybody and their mother to join my Substack. You can pay if you want. You can just join for free, and I interview people, and we're both like you. I am a tarot reader, and I'm a consulting astrologer. And you should say that's too. You are also, your books are open too. You know,
open. I do coaching, and a lot of the areas I'm focusing on right now are like helping people set visions, helping people, you know, do like love healing work and also grief work. So I want to say thank you too. It's absolutely a pleasure every time we talk. Like we connected, and then I saw you at a class, and then we like connected online, and ironically you were reading my book, I think, simultaneously.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, I wish you were in LA now, but I think I am going to LA later this year. We're going to talk about this and connect, I think.
Okay,
and
we totally will. I'm so excited, and we're gonna talk again. We're gonna do more IG lives. I hope. I'm gonna hold you to this.
Absolutely.
Okay.
See you next time. I've got so many astrology related questions, and like I don't know, I'm just fascinated by you.
Oh my God, same. We need to do a reading. We need to do a reading swap. Everyone's publicly hearing this. We're doing this in public so we can hold each other accountable. We will do a reading swap. And also, I just want to say hello to Chris Vargas if you're still there. One of my favorite artists who just joined. Very exciting. This is Shiva Honey. I want everyone to know each other. Okay. Have a beautiful. It's a day of Saturn, and I'm talking about this. I'm talking about Satan. How perfect is this? Have a gorgeous day, everyone.
Bye, guys.
Bye.